Assalamu alaikum wa Ramadan Mubarak. Welcome to day 3 of our Ramadan Conference. Welcome to our day 3, our final day of our Ramadan Conference. Today we have some honored guests that will be on an esteemed panel. I will first open up with Dua al-Fatiha to formally open us up for our day 3. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Ameen. Again, we are getting ready to continue with our program for our day 3. I will do the honors of introducing our panelists. So once I read your biography, you can come and have a seat at the table, inshallah. Our first panelist today is Brother Jafar Shabazz. He is the son of Bilal Shabazz and Malika Abdul Rahman. Jafar is married to his beautiful and lovely wife of 1 year and some change, Hasna Muhammad. He is 25 years old and has 5 siblings. Jafar is a proud board member of Muslim Culture Con, a national young adult Muslim organization that works to uplift, empower, and educate Black young adult Muslims in America. Jafar is passionate about developing a strong sense of cultural identity for Black American Muslims. It is imperative that we cultivate an Islamic culture that is developed by us, for us, that is connected to the Islamic tradition, that spans back person to person, all the way back to our beloved Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We must learn Islam within the established tradition and then make it our own so that we can play our role as a strong limb in the larger Muslim Ummah. Jafar recently moved to Houston with his wife Hasna for medical physics residency and is currently working at Memorial Hermann in the radiation oncology department. Jafar loves reading and teaching Quran and studying the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he loves to play video games and watch anime in his leisure time. Welcome, Brother Jafar Shabazz. Allahu Akbar. Next, I will introduce his wife, Hasna Muhammad. She is a 23-year-old teacher and education major hailing from Atlanta, Georgia, as a newcomer to Houston, Texas, with her husband, Jafar Shabazz. She is currently enrolled in Georgia State University, getting a bachelor's degree in human learning and development and working towards a career in early childhood education. She enjoys working with youth, taking part in youth development, and volunteering within her community. In her downtime, she likes to read and play games with friends and family. So welcome, Hasna Muhammad, the better half of Jafar Shabazz. Allahu Akbar. Our next panelist is Brother Benjamin Symington. He is an international educator and researcher hailing from Matheson, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. Benjamin graduated all college honors from Carthage College, a major in history with minors in Asian studies, and great ideals while at Carthage. Benjamin received the critical language scholarship for Hindi. After graduation, Benjamin received a Fulbright Nehru Open Study Research Award to Varanasi, India for the academic year of 2015 to 2016. That's Varanasi, India. After Fulbright, Benjamin spent 4 years working as a program coordinator for national fellowships and university scholars at Texas A&M University in College Station. Benjamin received his master's in Asian studies from the University of Texas at Austin in 2022. While at UT, he received the Foreign Language Area Studies Fellowship for Urdu and studied on the American Institute of Indian Studies Urdu Summer Program. He has worked at Prairie View since August of 2022 and is honored to work on Hallowed Grounds of the Hill. He currently serves as Director of Study Abroad. Welcome, Benjamin Symington. All right, last but definitely not least of our panelists, we have Johara Ferguson. She is a scholar of religion and race who uses sociological tools to examine the intersections of religion, race, and immigration within Black communities. Her interests lie in understanding how the religious lives of Black people influence Black experiences and identity formation. She is currently a doctoral candidate in the Department of Sociology at Rice University. There, she works as a graduate research scholar with the Banuch Institute for Religious Tolerance and the Religion and Public Life program. She has contributed to many projects examining issues related to religion and race, including religious discrimination, hate crimes, policing, and health. Her current book project, Black Muslim Marriage, Race, Religion, and the Making of Black American Muslims, explores how race, religion, gender, and immigrant status shape the process of marriage among never married Black Muslims living in the United States. Johara examines how U.S. Black Muslims consider Islam in their search for marriage partners, and how the process of marriage further develops Black and Muslim identities in the context of Muslim American community and the United States. Johara is an Atlanta native and proud alumna of Spelman College, where she completed her BA in International Studies and Religious Studies. Whew. Welcome, Sister Johara Ferguson, and the better half of Benjamin Symington. Takbir. And last, our moderator for this discussion today, I'm going to introduce Imam Abdullah Rashid. Imam Abdullah Rashid is an entrepreneur, engineer, and imam known for his systematic approach to business and community development. With a background in software engineering and a passion for education, Rashid has made significant strides in various industries, demonstrating a unique blend of technical expertise, creativity, and strategic vision. A family man at heart, he finds his greatest fulfillment in being a husband and raising his children. Welcome, Imam Abdullah Rashid. Allahu Akbar. So I will turn it over to our moderator, Imam Abdullah Rashid, and I will sit back and relax and enjoy this discussion. Thank you, Imam. Thank you. And hopefully I can survive after reading those long bios to iftar, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. I would like to first introduce the topic of our discussion. And the topic of our discussion is from aspiration to achievement. The Qur'anic call to action, focusing on vision, action, and fulfilling the destiny of the soul according to the Qur'anic principles. So we take a moment to think back 100 years, which seems not so distant. But if we think about it, many have came and many have went. Many movements have come and many movements have gone. Much aspiration and a lot of achievement. 100 years ago, we didn't have many masajid like the one that we're sitting in. We had different struggles. But we had aspiration. And the aspiration that we had We can see it described in the Quran in Surah Ash-Shams. In Surah Ash-Shams, Allah says that, and I'm going to paraphrase, the soul is inspired by Allah. It's divine inspiration. And this soul is made known of its potential that's dormant, its dormant potential, as well as its God consciousness, its taqwa. And God says, whoever invests in that soul, makes deposits, will be successful. And whoever neglects it, whoever covers up the potential, will be a loser. So over the last 100 years, what we've seen are individual aspirations as well as collective deposits, pain, struggle, blood, sweat, tears, ijtihad. And from those aspirations, we saw achievement. We see this cycle going. And this is where we find ourselves now, here in Masjid Warathuddin Muhammad, named after Imam Warathuddin Muhammad, the son of Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Sister Clara Muhammad, who also had aspirations and also achieved much. But we're here now benefiting from them. But we have aspirations too. And we can look back at what they achieved, and some of it we can model. Some of it we can extract guidance from the Quran, from the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and those that came before us. But some of what we have to do up here and in the community is unprecedented. It's unprecedented. We don't have, maybe in our lifetime, or 100 years back, 200 years back, 300 years back, we don't have something that we can point to give us exactly what we need to do. So this is where we come to this discussion, and where we want to explore aspiration, our current aspirations as a community, both personal and communal. And we want to explore what the Quran and the life of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam gives us as guidance in order to address those aspirations, accept those aspirations, and inshallah achieve them or make steps towards achieving them. Now, before I ask the first question, I would like to mention a dichotomy that we have in the Western thought. And that dichotomy is, you have two circles on a piece of paper. We have religion or deen on one side, and then we have the secular or the worldly on the other. So I'm giving this because as we have this discussion amongst each other, the panelists and those who are present, I would like us to be aware of this, because this has influenced the way we think. But this division is not an Islamic division. It's not something that comes from the Quran or our tradition. So I want us to think about how we can address that as we start to have that discussion. What I mean by the secular and the religious. Religious may be fasting, prayer, reading Quran, going to Hajj, etc. And the secular is engineering, science, economy, building, infrastructure, etc. So these things have been divided in the West, and we have been influenced as Muslims, unfortunately. So inshallah, the first question will be, what We'll start with Jafar this time. How does the Quran guide us to transform our aspirations into tangible achievements? What does Allah say about it? First question.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Begin with the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We send blessings, and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send blessings and peace upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Peace and blessing be upon him. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. How's everybody doing today?
Alhamdulillah.
So, thank you, Imam Abdullah, for that, for the beautiful introduction, I guess, to today's panel. And thank you to the masjid for inviting me and my wife to be on this panel, alhamdulillah. So I think to answer the question being, you received the question.
Yes, that was a lot. What is the Quran? How does the Quran guide us to transform our aspirations into tangible achievements? And all of us have had aspirations here. We heard the bios, so it's in us. We've traveled the path already. So.
It sounds like you've taken significant steps and have.
Listen. So, Jafar, just give us maybe your own personal experience, something you've aspired to, and how did you turn that into a tangible achievement?
I'd say the central point of my aspiring, because I've aspired and I'm still aspiring, hopefully, because I think that's just part of what I think the journey is as Muslims, is to continue to aspire to be closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that manifests in physical means in our lives. So that's what Imam Abdullah was talking about in terms of the dichotomy, or what I kind of call a cognitive dissonance that a lot of us live. So we live a Muslim life, and we live a American life. You know, I have my life where I go to the masjid, and then I have my life when I'm at work, and those two do not intersect. So I think part of my life, what I've been aspiring to do, is to really make sure that there is no dichotomy there, that those two are in line. So what I do in my daily life for work is me worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so I think it comes, and I get to that point by understanding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed me, has blessed each and every one of us with specific gifts. The message and the purpose of Islam, that I feel like one of the purposes of Islam is, you know, we worship, we submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the tradition of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us that part of that worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is being of service where we can. And so there are different ways that each of us can be of service. And when we are using the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us in order to be of service, that's where we are matching the two. So for example, as you might have remembered from my bio, not to go on too long, I majored in physics, and I'm currently working in medical physics right now. And so what comes with that is I'm in a secular world, in the world of science research and philosophy, kind of things like that. And at least what I'm bombarded with is a lot of atheistic ideas, or at the very least agnostic. And so it could be very easy for me to just be like, okay, yeah, physics is my work and that's it, and then I'm Muslim on the side, or I'm Muslim on that part of my life. Or what I can do, I can use the Quran as a means of increasing my knowledge in physics. Or I can use physics as a means of better understanding certain concepts in the Quran. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the olive oil in the Quran, this uses a specific word, I can't remember exactly, I think it's in Surah An-Nur. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about how there's a specific light that comes from it, and the word that he used for that light is a word that means that it creates its own light. And then you look and you go deeper into it, and you research it, and then you actually look at, oh wait, if you shine a specific, or you can use a specific wavelength of light, you can actually see that from that olive oil, it is emitting its own light. And that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put that in the Quran 1445 years ago. And so there is so much benefit that is in the Quran that we have to extract using our secular knowledge and our Islamic knowledge together in tandem, so that we can then use that as benefits for ourselves and benefits for humanity.
Inshallah, we'll just go down. We'll go in order. So to your better half. Yes, how does the Quran guide us on how to transform our aspirations to achievement?
Okay, to give a very simple answer, I think throughout the Quran, like we're told like, again and again to just to do what Allah has told us to do, right? Give service to those who need to be serviced, the needy, orphans, elderly, sick, so on and so forth. We're told to pray, be grateful, be regardful in like in our daily actions. But if we take only those instructions, we can apply that everywhere. And we're told once we work towards those actions of following what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked us to do, then we will be successful in whatever we do. So I think that is kind of what I use in any aspect is, okay, whatever I'm working towards, before I get to that, alongside that, I have to be constantly turning back to Allah, being grateful that I have goals to work towards, that I have means to benefit my life. And with that, I think constantly being grateful and constantly going back to Allah, like, okay, how do I do this? You know, in my prayers, Allah, show me the way, show me the way, show me the way. It gives me clarity in my tangible goals. It's you know, it's very kind of a hard concept to articulate, but in worshiping Allah, it shows you how to go about your life and what actions you need to take to work towards your small, intermediate, and long-term goals.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you. Thank you. Jahan.
Okay. So when you were asking the question, I think I was thinking like specifically about ayahs that kind of stuck with me, that have acted as like a sort of motivation for like to have aspirations within the world, right? Also within spiritual life, but then also thinking about how that has kind of ignited me to really move towards that goal and to achieve, right? And so I thought back to the ayah where like we're literally told as people, as humans, as creation, that you have not been created except to worship Allah, right? And we know that as Muslims, as you mentioned previously, that in Islam there is not this kind of dichotomy or this separation that exists within the world between our spiritual or religious selves and the world, the created world around us, right? Things that have been deemed as secular, right? As a sociologist, the mundane aspects of life versus like or the profane, mundane versus like the sacred, right? There's this idea of that. But we know as Muslims that there's a merging of those two together, right? And that when we think about worship or ibadah, like that can take different forms, right? That can be us in our prayers and the salah, like, you know, asking Allah in our dua for certain things, right? It can be our reading the Quran, but it can also be our work in the world, right? We can think about how work, I've done a lot of work on literally work, labor, right? And how religious people think about labor from a spiritual lens, right? And I think for us as Muslims, we are really benefited in a way because Allah basically is telling us that we've been created to worship Allah, but that the way in which the vehicle through which that looks for each of us in our lives may take different forms, right? So for some of us, it may be doing medical cooking. I don't even know what that means, like, right? And for others of us, it may be like teaching, education, right? Traveling the world, learning languages, building connections with different people, or writing, or doing research, right? So it may take different forms. In whatever form that takes, there has to be an intended goal of worshiping and service to Allah, right? And there also, and we know again in the Quran that Allah tells us that as believers, we're supposed to strive as in a race towards all that is good, right? And whatever means that our strivings take, Allah will bring us together in that, because ultimately the end goal is to worship Allah. And so I think that's how I think about it in terms of how the Quran specifically leads us to have aspirations, but also to achieve, to really work towards achievement in those goals, but ultimately those goals being a striving of worship and service to Allah.
Alhamdulillah. Shukran to the panelists and to our wonderful moderator. And I think I agree with everything that was said before. And to kind of go with what my wife was saying in terms of thinking about worship, one of the things with worship that makes it even more essential is knowing who you worship, right? And when we think about the question that moderator asked about our aspirations, if we think about worship, one of the important things for our aspirations is knowing our aqidah, knowing the study of God, theology. And when you look into aqidah and think about Allah's attributes, it's Allah's knowledge, al-qudra, Allah's power, and then al-irada, which is Allah's will. So anything that happens in the world, like in the Quran, we hear repeatedly, and Allah has power over all things, right? So when we think about whatever's going on in the world, and you look at Aqidah, when we see, kind of going to our brother in terms of science, you see a reaction on the surface level. You see this, you drop a childhood example, you drop a Mentos into a Coca-Cola and it shoots up in the air. On the face of it, that reaction is happening, but every single reaction, Allah is the cause behind it. So we can say at a kind of science level, you do this and that happens, but without Allah's hand, without Allah's sort of control over that, that can change. And why that's important is when we think about miracles, sometimes people are skeptical about miracles, but it's why we don't have to worry about miracles, because it's ultimately Allah can change the norm or break the norms as He wishes, right? So how does that relate to our aspirations? One of my favorite passages in the Quran is in Al-Imran, 173rd ayah to the 175th ayah. And basically with Rasulullah and the believers, it talks about how the hypocrites have gathered against you and they're trying to scare the Prophet and scare the believers. But what the verse says is, Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil. Allah is the not person, He's the best disposer of affairs. And at the end of that passage, the 175th, it talks about how the believers were successful. How does this relate to thinking about our aspirations? So Allah has all the power, Allah has all the knowledge and all the will. So whatever aspiration we have, if we say, Ya Rab, Ya Fatah, O our Lord, O the opener, and we do what we want to do, we say, Bismillah, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil, O opener, you are enough for us to be the best disposal of affairs. Whatever goal we have, inshallah, Allah can bring it to pass in this life, or He can reward us in the hereafter. So I think the big thing to know and to remember is Allah has power over all things, and whatever goals and aspirations we have, we don't have to worry about other people and enemies, but Allah can make things happen for us. So we have to start with that mindset with our goals and aspirations.
Allahu Akbar. So I want to ask a question about purpose. How do you discover? So let's say the young Muslim is coming up, and then they hear that Allah says, "We have not created men or jinn except for worship, or to worship me." And how does that person that has energy, they have gifts, they have some sort of aspirations, how does that person like discover and pinpoint what those aspirations are, what their purpose is in life is? How did you do it? And then how did you align that with Allah's path, Allah's will, or the guidance of the Quran? Anyway, yeah.
Okay, I would say, because I can only speak from my own experience, try everything, right? Try a lot of things, right? But the thing that makes you reflect on Allah's mercy is grace, like the amount of blessings that He's put into us, our community. That's the thing that you stick with. So I say that because at the end of high school, my entire life, my only aspiration was to be a stay-at-home mom. I said that my entire life. I just want to be a stay-at-home wife, have kids, and we're at home, we're making granola bars and stuff. That's it, right? But in high school, 11th grade, they're like, okay, so you're starting your college prep, and this year and that. I'm like, oh wow. Well, I'm not getting married right out of high school, so I have to figure out a way to use my time until that happens. So I ended up doing a couple of internships because it was required. So tried different things, admin, working with like kids my own age, some other stuff. And then I landed on interning in a classroom of first and second graders. And I thought, wow, this is nice. If my goal is to one day just be a great mother, this is as close as I can get. This feels good. So I continued to search out other internships where I would work with young children. And I loved it. And I loved it because children's, their curiosity and their innate want to do is so beautiful. And when you shape that properly, their God consciousness is inspirational. And so I kept doing that, and I thought, I think this is something that I have to stick to, because I don't think there's anything else in this world that could make me constantly reflect on the way that working with children does. So I would say try many things. As a person who didn't know what to do up until like the last second before graduating, try a lot of things, right? And then see how it makes you feel about your Lord.
So going back to that, the subtle, or it may not be subtle, maybe an agitation, but Allah inspiring the soul and making it known. So before it becomes a conscious, in your conscious mind, before you have a tangible, right, idea of what it is, maybe it's in the soul, and you're saying, try different things out, and you may connect with something. And then that makes you feel like you're doing what you were created to do. Okay. Anyone else want to chime in?
I think for me, don't be afraid to follow along people and connect yourself and be around people who do have a drive, have found their purpose. And then in doing that, you might find a place that fits you. So for me, for example, I spent most of my life looking at the work of my older brother and my older sister. And for a time, just looking at them kind of like on the sidelines because, there's a 4-6 difference. So for a bit of time, it was like, okay, I was too young because they were doing things like college students and older teens and young professionals and things like that. And then, so I'm just looking at that, following along, trying to find my place because it's almost like it's a bit of a shadow. It's like, for a good part of my life, I was always Akil's younger brother or Nagi's little brother. And there was nothing, alhamdulillah, I was proud of my siblings, so there was nothing that I felt that I was being minimized in a bit of that, but there is a bit of like some self realization that one kind of ends up looking for through that. And I would say through that and through following them, I was able to kind of find a place for me where I can fit. And it doesn't always have to align with what your career is. So for me, I do have my career right now, and I haven't necessarily found exactly how that intersects in the actual practicals. It's like theoretically, I love looking about physics and finding the miracles of physics in the Quran and things like that. I love that. But in terms of practically, other than of course, there is the baseline of service that is there. But in terms of does it always have to directly coincide with what you would say, kind of like what your purpose is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? I don't think that it necessarily always has to coincide at all times. Sometimes they can work in parallel together, and then you can use one thing as a means to support the other. So yeah, I say, just to sum it up, be around people who do have a purpose and who do have a drive, because they might inspire you. And then don't always think that they always have to coincide right away.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is, I'll ask a question, maybe 2 people will answer.
Okay.
Sure, we'll keep going 2 at a time.
Yeah.
And then we'll, inshallah, we'll try to open up for questions. So as people are speaking, if you wanna start to formulate questions, then do so. Okay, so thank you, excellent responses so far. I wanna talk about now a little bit about collective aspiration. So we all know that we're beneficiaries of our parent generation and those that came before. And they faced times that were unprecedented. And now we face a different set of circumstances that we have to work through, think through, work together on, and face. So what have you learned as you've navigated career, school, your life, that you think can benefit the community as we face the next evolution of what has become of us as a community? Like, how do we push through some of the challenges? What have you learned that will help us push through some of the challenges? How do we think some of the unique circumstances? So the Quran and Sharia and the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam will give us principles, but they won't tell us what the speed limit should be, like on the road out there. Like, you won't find in the Quran. There has to be some ijtihad. There has to be some rational thinking, and maybe we tried some things out and certain things didn't work. Right? You all have experienced the scientific process, right? Hypothesis and trying things out, right? So from your experience, what are some very important things to be prepared for, things to be thinking about, certain principles to adopt as a community as we face the next 100 years or so?
I would just say really 2 points to think about collective aspiration going forward, and things kind of come from my own life. So one of the things for me, when I was, the first time I read the autobiography of Malcolm X and read some of his other writings as well, one of the things he commented on when he was traveling in Africa was feeling limited because of only being monolingual, only speaking the English language. So he had all these wonderful, beautiful ideas about Islam, about Black people, about culture that he wanted to convey to people, but because of his linguistic or his language limits, he wasn't able to do those things. So for me, that was part of my inspiration to learn and try to learn other languages. So study, the languages I know, English, mashallah, but in addition to English, study Hindi and Urdu with advanced proficiency and working on Arabic. But I think for us as descendants of enslaved Africans, it's speaking a language that the dominant society doesn't speak is a kind of autonomy. It was something where our people spoke Serer and Wolof and Bambara and other languages. The so-called slave master didn't like that. They didn't want us to have that autonomy. So when you're able to speak another language, it's not only autonomy, but it's a culture. And as us as Black people, as Muslims, encouraging our people to study Arabic, and for young people in the Muslim community or Black as well as other people to bring people into the masjid to learn language. So we had an Arabic class, our roll-up class, a Swahili class, and it's open to the community. People could learn the language, but also see our etiquette, see our adab, see how we practice spirituality. And in turn, inshallah, with Allah's guidance, they can come to Islam. But having these types of intellectual opportunities open to the community, but we first have to learn those ourselves. The other thing in terms of collective aspiration, I'll say briefly, is in terms of spirituality. I know a big part of my journey to Islam was the beauty of the 99 names, of different types of spiritual practices that our ancestors did in Senegal and Gambia and Mali, different types of dhikr. So one of the things in the world right now with just when you look at being inundated with social media, with negative news, is mental health crises. And I think spirituality, whether it's through tahajjud, whether through lots of dhikr, salawat, adhkar, and all these things, it's a means of not only getting reward from Allah, but bringing peace to our hearts. In the Quran, it talks about in Arad, barely in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest. So for our people, we are very restless in our hearts, and we're inundated with images. We're seeing all this negative news. So for us as a community to really emphasize learning different languages for our intellectual development, but also learning how to sit still, to remember Allah, and to just have that peace of mind so that we get rewards from Allah Ta'ala, but also as we're going through life's challenges, whether it's working with youth or working in medical physics or the sociologist or study abroad, engineer, plumber, beautician, whatever it is, you can have peace of mind so that while it's craziness on the outside, internally, you can think about like the ducks, like the duck was real calm in the water, but those feet are gone, right? So in the same way, externally we're moving, but internally we're at peace and calm.
All right.
So I agree with everything you just said. I think especially I like the point about the remembrance of Allah, and just in hard times and challenging times. You mentioned like our, parents or grandparents' generation's time being unprecedented, but in a way I feel like today is unprecedented. And so I really have a lot of empathy for a lot of the younger people who are growing up, like the kids who are growing up today, in this time and, the years to come. Yeah, it sounds crazy. But I think things to deal with that, how do we deal with that, right, is kind of what the question is asking. And I agree that I think we have to have a connection to Allah, like internalized connection to Allah, so the remembrance of Allah. And to think of, I remember when I was a kid, my mom said this thing that at the time, I did not really understand where she was going with it. But she was like, I would talk about my friends and I'd be like, yeah, this one is my best friend, or that one is that. And she would stop me and she would be like, they're really good friends, but you don't have any best friends. And I was like, what does she mean by that? And she was saying like, Allah is your best friend. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like, okay. But I think that is a really actually, it's a big deal to think about and something to reflect on, right? Who is it that is with you when things are really challenging, when you have no one to kind of be around you, if you have no one to listen to you, like, a friendly ear? Allah describes himself as a wakil, right? And a wali, right? The one who we can trust and the protecting friend. And so to really think about that, I think especially for like today's society where we are very disconnected, and I think it does have an impact on people in terms of just like isolation, mental health, things like that. And so I think that's really important for the young people to definitely reflect on. In addition to that, I do think that some of the things that we can work on as a community is how do we become more connected, really? What does that look like in today's society? And so, I don't know, just something to think about. And then I think outside of that, one of the things that I thought about, even in related to the last question, was just like, how do we grow where we're planted? Sometimes Allah puts you in a place and you may feel like, why am I here? Like, I did not plan to be here. This is not like what I had in mind. But maybe you're there for a specific reason. And sometimes you have to just grow your roots in that soil.
Yes.
And allow it to thrive and to be a beautiful thing for things to come. So.
Alhamdulillah. So thank you all. And to your point, I would like to go ahead and open up the discussion. And to your point of, you started to point out some of the practical things, the tangible things that we could do better as a community. How do we connect more? Or how do we become more connected? Growing where you are, right? Those are tangible things. I'd like for us to, someone from the audience, or let's give the audience a chance first, but if no one has anything, then we can do it here on the panel. Let's discuss some tangible things that we need to address as a community, especially for myself. I'm 35, so I think I'm the oldest up here, and yeah. Yes, yeah, you get to be the oldest now. Yeah, so it seems kind of weird to say now, but I'm saying I'm 35 and under, let's say. Okay, what are some of the issues, some of the major themes that we need to start to address head on? Like the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Nation of Islam, they made a bold statement. The white man is the devil. That's a bold statement that people can get behind. You know, the message to the black man, they put out the message to the black man, Walter D. Muhammad, the Crave movement, right? Words make people, etc. So what are some very, very direct, very important things that we need to be focused on? Inshallah, let's talk about those. Honey.
Yeah, I guess this question is directed to Sister Johara. What are some of the major themes that you found in your research and challenges when it comes to marriage and building the African American family, considering the climate, and then what are some of the things in our history that worked well that we're not doing?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think so. Some of the themes that I found are, one is that I think marriage is really, we know as Muslims, it's really connected to our faith, right? I think another thing that we kind of overlook sometimes, or maybe we know, but we don't really put a name on, is that it's also connected to our sense of identity and self. And I'm looking at like African American, or not just African American, I look at Black Muslims, the extensiveness of that term, right? But for all of the people who I interviewed and talked to, it's connected to how they understand themselves in the society that we live in, which is the concept of the United States, but within the Muslim American community as well. And so that said, there are also a lot of challenges, right, that exist when people are, engaged in this process of trying to look for a mate. And I think those challenges are compounded specifically for Black Muslims in particular. So we know that we live in a society that is not majority Muslim, right? So there's that already of like, how do I find someone who shares the same faith as me. And not just shares the same faith as me, I think also one of the things that is a challenge is thinking about the way in which we express that faith or practice that faith. How does that match well with people who are trying, and I think increasingly that becomes an issue as well for people. And then vice versa, like looking within the community dynamics, right? We know the Muslim American community specifically is the most ethnically diverse religious community in the country. And although Black Muslims represent a significant piece of that, segment of that population, they deal with a lot of challenges and barriers to marriage that make it kind of difficult for them. And so I think one of the things that, you know, we can think on as a broader Muslim community is like why that is, right? And I think we have some ideas around that. And you know, how do we work through that, right? But then also I think there are real concerns even within our Black Muslim community spaces, where quite frankly, we have some other challenges as well. Like, you know, I talk to people in my study who are based in Houston, and I would say like for single Black Muslims living in Houston who want to partner or marry like, you know, other Black Muslims, that's a very real challenge because the community is already so dispersed and there's not kind of like one space that you're guaranteed to go in and know that there's going to be a significant population of young single Black Muslims that you can kind of tap into. And so we have to explore that, like what, and I think that kind of goes back to like some of the things that, you know, kind of mentioned earlier in terms of like disconnection and like, yeah, like where are people, like, you know, so, and then I think the second, I don't want to go over too long, but what was the second part of your question?
Yeah, just what has worked well in the past is not working for us now.
That's a good question. I mean, so I know one of the things that a lot of people talk about that I like, this is just anecdotally, like, I remember hearing from like, whether it was my parents or not, well, yeah, actually a little bit that factored into their story, or like relatives, people, is like just how there was a sense of, like, they were proud to be distinctly Muslim. And I don't know, it's not to say that like we aren't proud to be Muslim anymore, like that's not what I'm saying at all, but I think it was like distinctly Muslim. Like my mom talks about growing up and like literally writing on applications like for a race like Malawian. And like she was like, I'm not the only one, they were like, I don't know who this person is, how to put them into this particular. But you know, like there was a sense of pride, right? And so I think like when people like talk and reminisce about like, oh, the conventions, right? You know, and that type of thing, and that being a space where they could like meet people or like whatever. I think there was a pride there that I think, you know, maybe we can investigate that and explore that a little more and maybe tap into that some more. Like how to be proud of your distinct identity and heritage as a Muslim, but also as specifically as a Black American Muslim, I think.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions, comments? Just name it.
Assalamualaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
When you talk about disconnect, there's been a long-running disconnect between generations. You know, the hard work spend time together, right? But we did. And so what do you suggest for us? What needs to be done? How can we bridge that? Because we have you sometimes when you're young, wherever you came from, and then like they're gone. I can remember a time when we had so many teenagers, buying children of capital was no issue, you know. But things change and dynamics change within the lives. So what do we do? What do you do? How can we work on that bridge? And not that we expect to be all the time doing everything, not that, but not to lose that connection. And further,
So for me, for anybody?
anybody, What would you like, what would you need from us, what would you, I mean, we pray for you,
Yeah.
you know, but I miss that.
Yeah.
I miss that.
In my experience, I think there is a two-way factor
Yes.
that has to be addressed. I think for us as the younger folk and the younger generation, we have to, like Sister Jahara said, we have to find our distinct Islamic identity as Black Muslims. And once we we realize that, like we realize that we are a people. We are Bilalians, we're Black American Muslims, we're a tribe, whatever, we haven't, nailed down what the title is gonna be, but we are a people. Just like how Palestinian Muslims see themselves as a people. Just like how Bangladeshi Muslims see themselves as a people. And when they go somewhere, they say, where are the Bangladeshi Muslims at? I need to be where they at. And so we need to see ourselves in that same way, because then once we do that, then we'll start to take ownership of the things that we have. And our institutions that are sitting here and that are fortunately on life support in a lot of cases. And then once that happens, once we find that identity, well then, inshallah, it'll drive us to come back. And so that's our part, to come back. And then the other side of the street is that the generation above us has to be able to welcome us back with open arms and support us when we come with new initiatives. So it's like we have to come back, we have to learn how to follow. Not gonna take away back pieces, but we can't just come back and try to run the ship and we've been gone and haven't been here. No, we can't do that. But then also we have to be welcomed back and we have to be not judged when we come back. I know a lot of people, they've left because they didn't feel comfortable, they felt judged. Because maybe they didn't have that same dedication, they weren't out there on the corner, selling the fish fries to get the masjid open. And that is something we have to acknowledge as the work that the generation before us put in. But then also that can't be used to ostracize us as like, y'all young folk didn't do that work, so y'all ain't like us, because we did it, and y'all did do it. But that can't be the energy that is there, because then we'll see that and they'll say, I'll just go somewhere else.
I think I want to add to one point, like to what you kind of said, just in thinking about young people getting more involved. Like, I think the two-way street thing is so important because, I don't know, I just feel like I have to say this, but like, I know that there is a phenomenon right now, especially within African American Muslim communities around the country, where a lot of people talk about how there are no longer young people at the masjids, right? There are older people at the masjids, or like young people feel like older people are kind of like taking control and not like leaving the post, so to speak, or not like creating a space for younger people to come and get more involved. And I think that's probably true in a lot of places. I also come from a different kind of context from the Atlanta community, where I think there is a lot of young people. I think that there's a dynamic going on sometimes where, yes, there may need to be spaces for young people to be kind of taken and nurtured into roles, right? I think that does need to happen, but I also think that like we as young people, yes, I'm still. I don't know what that means, but like we can charge ourselves to be more active and to take a more active. And I think sometimes I don't necessarily see that with some of my peers. If I'm keeping it 100, I think that sometimes we need to kind of do more to come back to like what is it like? Yeah, I live in Houston. I like how you pointed me out. You pointed me out, and I appreciate that. Like, I used to live here in Houston, closer, come here a lot more, right? But then what does it mean where like the dynamics of city and space, right? And school and all that stuff creates this separation, right? But we can't let that be the thing that separates us. We have to intentionally come back, return to each other, right? And so I think we have to challenge ourselves to do that. And that's why I appreciate things like even this, right? So you called me to do this, right? You and I felt charged to do it. And so I think we have to call on each other and, bring people back. And we have to challenge ourselves to come back. So, yeah.
So just real quick, it's 3:00 and some of the panelists may have to be excused. I think some have to, some other obligations. So I just want to, before we have the next few questions, just want to thank them. Those that have to be excused, just want to thank you all for joining. Thank you for your contribution. Inshallah, this won't be the last time. We'll have more of these dialogues, and like you said, we will pull each other, inshallah, to be present and to move our community forward. So I just want to say, Jazakallah khair for your time and contribution. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, so we'll just go. We're just warming up. Seems like we want to take some more questions because this is where the conversation can expand and we can expound and have more discourse. So, Sister Hassan.
I just, really quick, I wanted to add something a little even more tangible. I saw a post the other day that was saying, what we can all say that our communities look very different than it looked 20 years ago, right? That connectedness. And a sister was saying, maybe the price of us being in community is a little bit of annoyance, So in taking what the two that I'm sandwiched in between said, the idea of a two-way street, if the younger generation has some grievances, some annoyances with the older generation, and the older generation also has grievances with the younger generation, well, okay, be annoyed, but avoiding like even a little bit of discomfort is literally what keeps us away from each other. So like she said, challenge ourselves. Right now, we live in a very individualistic world. So our thing is, at least in America, it's be comfortable. It's do what feels good to you. But, that keeps you unchallenged. That keeps you very mellow. Like that just keeps you docile, right? That's not you growing. So in order community, yeah, be annoyed. Man, this is my face asking me about my life, or man, that guy is always loud. I can hear her. I can hear him or her when I'm making my sunnah's yada or whatever. Okay, have a conversation or stay annoyed. No, I'm being so serious because I'm right now challenging myself with the idea of, okay, I'm unhappy in this moment. I'm still going to show up though. I'm not going to avoid something just because I'm unhappy about something. I'm happy about it in the moment, right? So, like she said, challenge yourself with being uncomfortable because the avoidance is what is, driving us apart right now.
Alhamdulillah.
I just want to say thank you so much for that. I spent a whole week with like a 15, 16-year-old grandson, and I would love to avoid it right now, but I'm going to challenge myself to
Okay, so we'll go to Sister Miriam, Sister had her hand up here, and then Sheikh Tala. I just want to say one thing: deeper connections. I believe we need deeper connections. A number of brothers have had me over their home for dinner. Been in home, ate dinner, hung out with them. I have a closer relationship with them than some of the brothers I see at the masjid, right? And they had great influence on how my life turned out. So I would say we need deeper connections that go beyond just seeing each other here in the masjid, and that will foster of love and appreciation, and you want to see those people that you have those deep connections with, inshallah. Sister Miriam had it.
Just follow the conversation I'm hearing here, it's a lot of concern about the youth coming back to the masjid and how we can get them back to the masjid. But I've noticed that the environment that we live in, there's a lot of incentives for the youth to be somewhere, like on social media, they get a dopamine rush, they might see their friends. There's a lot of incentives in different areas for the youth. So I was, thinking about some things. How can we incentivize the youth by coming back to the masjid? Is there ways that we can create some programs or just any ideas? I'm lost myself. We have teenagers, we have children. There's different ways that we might give them incentives by learning the Quran, learning Islam. But as far as between 16 and 18, or even 16 to 23, like, what are some ways that we can even give them that dopamine rush that they get from social media, or some type of incentive for them to come back to the masjid? Or am I even thinking on the right lines? Am I the only one that feels this way?
No, Bismillah, I don't think you're alone in that regard. And I guess I start with a kind of historical anecdote. So over 500 years ago, we saw the emergence of the printing press. And that revolutionized books, how we consume knowledge. And actually among the ulama, among the scholars of Islam, there was actually intense debate about the usage of the printing press. Eventually people saw it as permissible, but people who were the enemies of Islam, people who were not trying to spread the call of Allah and His Prophet ﷺ, were using the printing press. Now that doesn't mean that whenever there's new technology, because that example, we just jump in head first and we don't use our principles. But I think with social media, and whenever you have new technology and new things, there's always going to be a debate and discussion, but I think it does us a disservice if we just immediately demonize it, villainize it, and see it as negative, because if there are good means, and I mean, if you name, at least from my experience, any major scholar, whether you look at WD community, whether you look at sort of other communities, a lot of people have social media, and the masjid has a Facebook page, so that's a reality. So I don't think that like social media has to only be a negative. I think with anything, you have fire. I like grits. I'm gonna make some grits with the fire, but if I put my hand in it, it's gonna hurt. Now it's gonna burn. So there's constructive use of things. So I think among the scholars, among imams, talking to the leaders in our community, whether it's just community people who are leaders, whether it's the imams who are leaders, and using Islamic principles to make the best use of whatever technology we have, whatever resource we have, because they are getting drawn, so young people are getting drawn to different spaces through social media. So for us, as long as we're moving in alignment with Islamic principles and sort of those types of things, for whether it's TikTok, whether it's YouTube, we can use those things to bring people to engage at the masjid space, but also in digital spaces, because so many young people, my students at Prairie View, like people are connecting through GroupMe, they're connecting on Zoom, they're connecting on Teams, they're doing different things, whether it's projects, whether it's social things. So I don't think we have to have only one path of engagement. If there was, multiple paths. So I think to your question, we should engage with the technology, but we always have to use Islamic principles and methodology and consult with the community for that.
I guess in terms of some practical things that we can kind of think of. As we are pushing the younger generation to build that identity, there is going to be that push, something that is going to incentivize them to come to the masjid, to run the masjid. When they get to the masjids, there has to be something for them to do. So I know one thing, I was in it's the Adams Center in DC, Virginia. And they have an entire cafe in there. And a masjid. has Spring Greens right next door to it, and the barber shop, and the hair salon, and a meat store, and El Medina Meat Market. So they created a situation where there is an entire community of things which you can tangibly do in that space. So as a college student, yeah, I need to spend, well, if you're a good student, you spend maybe 2 hours a day still studying. Um, so you need a place like, hey, you know what? Spring Greens would have been real nice because I can go into Spring Greens, I can get me some Jada chai, I can give me some tea to sip on, I got the hot, the hot bar, I can give me some lunch for a good price, and I can sit there and I can study because there's Wi-Fi. So we create spaces like that so that when we're doing the things that we're already doing in our lives, it's practical to be there. It's practical as a student to come and have a study group with my Muslim friends at the masjid because there's a space for us to have a study group at the masjid. It's practical for me to want to go to the masjid to see my boys because, hey, they got a game room with us with a Switch, and we can play Smash Bros, or we can play Tekken, we can play Street Fighter, we can play 2K against each other. Oh, the Adhan calls, hey, let's come for prayer. It's practical for me to come to the masjid because, hey, there's a basketball court. I play ball with my boys, if they pick up, oh, the Adhan is called, boom, there's a halaqa after that. Well, shoot, I guess I have to sit down for the halaqa. And maybe that's where a little bit of that older influence comes in, where it's like, hey, you just gonna walk out after prayer, and I said, this halaqa, come on in, man. Come sit halaqa, and then you can get back. And you do that with a nice way. So there's just different things that we can establish in our communities that's gonna pull folks through. And different programs that we can put on that'll call folks in, that'll build a relationship with the masjid.
Okay, what I thought of from your question, and then also what I'm hearing from you two as well, is exposure to what it feels like to be in the masjid, but to be, around Muslims and to feel, I don't know what the word is, but connected, yes, thank you. To feel connected. I've been at summer camps, I've worked at summer camps where, it's like, okay, it's time to calm down, we're gonna go into the musalla, we're gonna pray. If you're not praying, take a nap. Because this is a calm space, right? That's exposure for those children and those young teenagers, right? The masjid that I grew up in, there's a courtyard outside. It's like, okay, if you don't have the discipline to sit through Sunday Taleem, go outside, but you're very near, right? So kind of that same idea. Social media, right? Okay, are you using social media responsibly? What are you on here for? What are you looking for, right? Maybe you need to expose yourself to the kind of Islamic information that's out there that will feed what you are looking for. I think that's, especially at teenage age, we don't realize, and I think the words are coming to me only now because I feel like I'm on the other side finally, but that thing that we're looking for is work towards Allah, right? And, the dopamine is fine, but there's another chemical, the serotonin is better, right? And so when you get exposure to feeling connected to Allah and Islam, you get serotonin and it'll last longer. And you're like, oh wow, what I'm looking for is not over here, it's over there. So just very, simply exposure and kind of the ways that they spoke about.
Okay, so Sister Terry, and then Sheikh Taleem.
Oh,
Every time I want to touch on something, somebody else mentioned it. So, for example, when you talk, just bringing in the intergenerational relations, that was really heavy on my mind. And I was thinking about how the fact that maybe we don't value each other is what gets in the way. you know, you walk too slow or you walk too fast, you know. How do you come to value each other? I don't know you, I don't know what you went through, so I don't value you. You don't know me, you don't know what I've gone through, you know. So I think about ways that we could get to know each other and then maybe value each other. So sort of like mentorship or, for example, young people going to the elders and taking oral histories, for example, you know. So getting to know each other is really, really important. And that's gonna help us to value each other and then maybe to start doing things together. And then when the question was asked about what was done in the past that's not being done now, I thought about collective economics, which, you know, all these things that you mentioned in Atlanta, for example, you know, I thought about that. And I don't know why that isn't happening. I don't know why that isn't happening. It's something because the fact that you talked about it, I hope everybody feels inspired and is already thinking, the wheels are already turning. I think another thing is that we're not really good at talking to each other. We don't know how to talk to each other in a really respectful way. And I think that goes both ways. You know, I think that sometimes elders could be harsh and insensitive, but the same with the youth in the way that they talk to the elders. So I feel like we need to learn how to speak to each other in a really loving, thoughtful, respectful way, and also how to uplift each other. Yeah, so I think that's.
That's all. Thank you. You have anything to add?
I do have something. Very quickly. I guess tangibly, wow, I'm getting emotional because it's hitting me off. My grandmother's very sick right now. I don't know why I'm choosing to cry about it right now. Anyway, she has stage 4 cancer. Something that you said, Terry, the last thing that you said, something that I think about, our kids, our teenagers, our young adults spending time with their grandparents. So my great grandmother, she's Christian, and both my grandmothers, they transitioned to the Nation of Islam. But I spent significant time with all 3 of them, right? Which meant that when I was dropped off with them, I spent time with their friends, right? And so there was coaching and training on how you spend time and how you respect elders. Nowadays, I think, I don't have any kids, but this is my experience from the outside looking in, so I might be wrong, but you know, people are not dropping off their kids, their teenage or young adults, are not encouraging their young adults to spend time with the elderly for the sake of spending time with them. You know, a lot of people are like, you need to go to your grandmother because I can't do this right now. Or like, go to your grandmother because she can whip some sense into you because I can't do this right now, right? Or you're gonna go spend the summer with your grandfather so that you can learn some discipline, yada, yada, whatever. My experience and my brother's experience and most of my cousins who are around the same age, our experience of spending time with the elderly is solely to spend time with them, right? And so what that means is if I'm there, that means that I'm being trained to be of service. That means I'm being trained to speak respectfully. That means I'm being trained to notice and hear. And maybe the language barrier, right, it decreases because I'm around my grandmother, I'm around my grandparents, and I'm learning to read in between the lines. I'm learning, and they're learning how to speak to me, right? So, and that's the exchange right there. So I would say at a very tangible, real thing that I don't see so much anymore, younger people my age have to challenge themselves to spend time with the elderly, those close to them and maybe not as close to them, just for the sake of spending time with them. And then if you're a parent, you spend time not because, oh my gosh, she's about to leave, or, you know, just like, okay, let's just watch, just look at her. No, it's a it's almost like a cultural competency training between the generations. So, yes.
Checked out. Okay, sister, I'm sorry,
Foxy.
Sister Fatima.
Assalamualaikum, everyone.
Walaikum salam.
First, I want to say Jazakallah khair to the panel. I feel like it's Black excellence. I'm saying, mashallah, panel and moderator, alhamdulillah. My question is, before I ask my question, I noticed that everyone on the panel is not from Houston. I too am not from Houston. I'm from Philly. And I've been here for about 3.5, almost 4 years. And I wanted to know from your experience coming to Houston, because the beautiful communities that you come from, based on what you said, have things already at play. Have you ever experienced wanting to replicate what you saw that went well in Houston? And what feedback were you given if you tried to do it? So for example, I feel like it's Becca Medina, Philadelphia. Like, I feel like that's the order of importance for me. So when I moved here, I saw a lot of gaps, and I'm like, why don't they have this? Why don't they do this? And I would share it with people, and they're like, well, you can create it, and you can. And I'm like, I can't do everything now. Some of those are not even my strong suits. But for example, I'm used to going to Juma, and there's a platter being served or being bought after Juma. After the khutbah, after you pray, you go and buy food. It's just a way for the community to gather, to to eat, to hang out. When I moved here, I'm like, they don't have selling platters here, okay? But there's also, I'm like looking for that connection, and I'm like, I know the population of African American Muslims is not as big as where I come from, and it's not as visible. So how would you, I guess, answer that question of, do you want to, or have you tried to replicate those beautiful things? And what's been your experience, or if that's even something you're considering? I'm interested to know your feedback, because it's something that's been weighing on me a lot.
So you don't need to get her out here, so.
Well, Bismillah, so just to make sure I understand the question, are you saying, are there things we've seen in communities outside of Houston that we want to replicate in Houston?
Yes.
So I guess, I hope this is somewhat useful, but for me, my story is a little, it's different in the sense that I embraced Islam in a college town in Texas about 7.5 years ago. So for me, just coming to Houston and seeing Black masajid, I was like, oh man, this is like Jannah on this side, basically, So it was in a sense where like, in a cultural context that felt very familiar, but in terms of beliefs, it was in line, because I was in other spaces where the beliefs were in line and people were generally friendly, but in terms of our cultural expressions as Black people, it wouldn't necessarily be reflected in those spaces. So I guess for me, my first position was gratitude. And I guess it also speaks to just how different perspectives, if you're kind of coming from a Philly context or, New York City, there's a different dynamics. But I guess in short, I would say my first feeling was gratitude to be in a space where there were people of a similar cultural background who practice Islam, and the fact that the chicken sausage was sold out there before, and I was like, man, because I'm used to miss sausage, and the fact that I could have a long sausage was, American in its own right. But I think, to more serious note, I think there are a lot of benefits. The fact that the history of these masajids, the fact that there are multiple communities. But as far as not having been in another community, one thing I could see in terms of, just benefit, I think, I'll just say two things. One, I think is, I did one of the programs with ILI, so I think having more people engaged with learning and Islamic learning from our different Black Muslim communities, because I think it's something underappreciated. I think people come to some of our masajid, especially if they're not African American, for the experience, because generally Black folks are nice and friendly and all that kind of stuff, but people who are coming from outside aren't necessarily coming to learn, which is a disservice to them, because there's so many knowledgeable people in our community, to my left and my right. So I think in that sense, encouraging people to make better use of the knowledge. And I think I'm fasting, so I think the food element as well, like in terms of we have a lot of good chefs. So I think, all jokes aside, really trying to have more cafe type experience, because I've been in the Massachusetts in Boston, and it was, I forget the name, I think it's where the Ella Collins Center is, near where Malcolm was back in Roxbury. But that masjid, they had a big cafe, spring greens. I think food is one of those human universals. So whether it's like one night a month and people know there's gonna be bean pies and, bean soup and bean soda, I'm kidding about bean soda, but, lots of things. Just having that be a regular thing, so.
So actually, Atlanta was leading in terms of how I spoke. Atlanta was a very new experience for me. I only went to Atlanta when we were long distance when we first got married. I'd been to Atlanta beforehand and I'd seen the things, but it was like a recent thing where I actually was really exposed to the potential of Atlanta. Coming from South Florida, Broward County, I say Miami because nobody knows where Miramar is. So it's just north of Miami, 10 minutes of that. But the experience there, Masjid al-Ansar there, first masjid in the state of Florida, where the experience is that, unfortunately, our masjid there is, I think there's a problem of, young adults and young folk in the masjid here. Masjid al-Ansar, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward and have mercy upon our elders who are keeping it afloat over there. It's a much different experience. And so with Florida, it's a specific thing because unfortunately, Florida and South Florida specifically pushes young folks out. If you're not in medicine, if you're not in hospitality, you can't afford to live in Florida. It's expensive, it's getting more expensive, and then there's just not even good industry, there's not good jobs there. Houston's a little bit different. Houston has the potential. So that's a beautiful thing. It's more spread out than Atlanta. Party. But and so I think just speaking from that experience and just starting off simple and then really making the connections with the other Black masajid in our in Houston to do those things. So yeah, we might not have the means to put on a full-on cafe with just our resources here, but you know what? We work with Mercy, we work with Masjid Tawheed, Taleem, and I'm still new here. Masjid Taleem, I don't know all the masjids just yet. Even I really love IIC, it's the Iranian Islamic Center in terms of how they came up. And how the current environment, what it looks like there, is not necessarily reflective of how they started in terms of being a majority convert mosque, or I guess community. And so then, but using those connections and really emphasizing those connections between our communities because we all have a similar experience, we all have similar goals. Inshallah, we all have similar purpose, and then use that to start something. Start something, and then we take it upon, we do something here, we do something there, we do something there. And with Houston, it's all spread out, so it takes us 40 minutes to get to Masjid Tawheed from here, right? But you know what? Hey, that's part of the sacrifice, that's part of the challenge that we're just gonna have to, embark on in order to make those connections with our communities across Houston, so that we can do that. And yeah.
Okay, really quick, because I grew up in Atlanta, so, my only experience is Black Muslim everywhere. Like, there's that, we know that. But the only, and I've traveled other states, and I've seen Philly, I've seen Florida, I've seen North Carolina, I've seen California, right? New York, Chicago. The only difference between places that you're saying that, oh wow, they have this community aspect down pat is, I think the word ownership floated around. That's the only thing, right? There are so many people who I'm sure go here. Again, we're new, but I'm so sure that there are people who go here but don't have the sense of ownership to say, you know what, I wanted enough to put what I see in other places here. That's the only difference between Atlanta and here, right? If you're looking, so yes, you have to think about things like, oh, everybody's spread out, right? Start planning, right? You have sisters, you have whatever, that's, you know what, I'm looking for a new place to live. You know what, okay, sacrifice 5 years of your life to move closer, you know? Find your part and do it. You know, I know tons of people in Atlanta, they were not the people who were on the ground. You know, they're like, okay, well, but I can drop some cash though, right? A lot of people are like, you know what, I don't have the time, I don't have the money, but I do have XYZ skills. I'm very good at organizing administratively, right? I'm very good at such and such, right? Other people are like, you know what, I don't have any of those three, but I have a lot of connections. If you need XYZ, I know people who can give that to you. Find your part, do it. And take ownership of your own community. That's the only difference. So.
Alhamdulillah. So, really good feedback. So I would like to ask a question. So I'm from Houston, and as we know, the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he would use the genius, the ingenuity of people that came from other places, like Salman al-Farisi, you know, and others, right? And they made significant contributions to al-Islam in Mecca and Medina and the spread of al-Islam. So we welcome you and others from other places, right? But there is a factor, there's two factors I want to point out. One, there's an intersection between like passing the baton to the next generation, where there's like a fall off, right? So my mother, some of the sisters back there, some of the brothers here, they had robust programming. We had Claire Muhammad School, we had fashion shows, we had entertainers, culture nights, all those sorts of things. Restaurants, like, the fish, daycares, all types of things. And then as time went on, for whatever reasons, you don't see those things like continuing. So then when you come up, you may just come up as a young person in Houston, like, man, why do I do this? And you think it's never been done before. It's just one of the challenges, one of the gaps, as you mentioned, right? So that's one thing that we're experiencing. But then the second thing, as Sister Hasna said, is just the ownership, right? So us that are coming up, we gotta just see something that we're passionate about. And even though we're gonna have to learn how to navigate the resistance that we may experience, and it may be uncomfortable, we have to navigate those things. It may be uncomfortable, but if we feel like strong enough about it, we gotta do it. We just gotta say, look, you know what? I'm gonna put some money behind it. I'm going to put some energy. I'm gonna build a team, and we're just gonna put it on, you know? So I think that's where we are now, right? Where a lot of those things I grew up in the womb here. And I just remember nights when Ramadan, man, iftar, packed. The Seeking the Night of the Power program, packed in here, packed outside, kids running around, just booming. We didn't have enough room. But as I mentioned, you know, generation after generation, we have everybody goes off to college, people don't come back. We have all these different challenges. So that's what we're experiencing, right? So we need more people that are passionate about different things, like the Ikhra Voice competition, you know, and for them to lead, initiatives, and inshallah we can support each other and create the life that we want, inshallah. So that's where we are right now. It's like we are, like, most of us in our careers are responsible for things that, like, if we didn't keep them up, the company that we work for or the business that we have will lose millions of dollars or thousands of dollars, right? Like, we have critical positions. We know how to lead. We know how to create a strategic plan. We know how to create tasks and create goals and things like that. So that type of training we need here, you know, and we'll have to have a conversation about resistance. That's a real conversation, inshallah, we'll have to have. But thank you for that. That's an excellent question, Sister Mary.
I just wanted to add on what you were saying. Basically, that kind of goes back to the conversation where you were saying Islam and how it's a dichotomy between Islam and our outside world. Like you said, we have this profession and training to bring back to our community, but a lot of times our younger people don't bring back their skill to the community. They just keep their skill over here and keep Islam over here, you know. So they say, yeah, I'm a healthcare professional. I might have this over to the side, but I'm just come to the masjid on Friday. I'm gonna pray. I'm gonna say, hey, assalamu alaikum, everybody. I'm gonna leave, and I'll go back to being my healthcare professional Monday through Friday. So I think it's a merging of those two things.
Bismillah, I think I appreciate that comment, Sister Miriam, and just, this will be my last thing for now. But I think one of the great Muslim poets who lived in India back in the 1300s, Amir Khusro, he's created different styles of music and poetry, but before he got, spiritual and really deep into Islam, he wrote all this like love poetry, secular love poetry about this person and that and all this kind of stuff. But when he met his sheikh, his teacher, all of his poetry was about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of his poetry was about, the beauty of Islam. So I mentioned that example because for us, and it kind of ties into some of the earlier comments about purpose and thinking about our purpose. For us, like to have a dynamic view of purpose, not that you're only going to do one thing for your life, but Rasulullah says something talking about actions about your intentions, right? So if you're a healthcare professional, intend to do that for the sake of Allah. If you are an engineer, intend to do it for the sake of Allah. And as a part of doing that for the sake of Allah, sharing those skills. So for instance, I know in Chicago, or right outside Chicago with Iman on the south side, they have a health clinic, right? So if you are, a healthcare professional, maybe biannually at Masjid WD, there's a health screening. Because I know for us, I remember one of our scholars said, Imam Jamil said, we are digging our grave with our forks and our knives, right? So we think about health screening, we think about that. Like for myself, with language, I don't know how many people want to learn Urdu, but I'd be happy to help if you try to namaste, catch a hand, all this kind of stuff. So I'd be happy to do that. But for different skills, we just try to pitch in, even if it's an hour a month or 2 hours a month. But to your point, if we have that intention of we're doing this for the sake of Allah, have that intention in our workplace, inshallah, we have that same intention in the masjid, or Allah, I'm doing this health screening for your sake, and you're in the masjid, Allah only knows how much He'll reward us for those things, inshallah.
So I'm just gonna ask everybody to give a closing remark because we're way over time. And I know the conversation is just warming up. That just means we need to have more, right? So we can schedule more conversations. So I'm gonna ask everybody to give a closing remark. Just it could be anything that touched your soul, your spirit during this conversation. And if you want to talk to some of the panelists after, if they have some time, inshallah, we can continue after. So I just want to start with Jerome. You go and make decisions.
Okay, just to piggyback off what Benjamin said. And to wrap back around to the first thing that we were talking about, worshiping Allah. Like he said, that 1 hour here from 10 people is a lot of working power. And that's how the generation above us did it, right? And the generation above that did it, right? And, a lot of times we fall into underestimating ourselves, but that also kind of translates to we're underestimating Allah. Allah is the most powerful, the most wise, the most merciful, right? And when you're thinking, this is not going to be worth it, right? Think instead, Allah will make it worth it, So in that work that you do, you just make the dua, pray. Like you're never, Allah, I want to do this for my community. I want it to benefit this way. My kids, my grandkids, whatever the generations that come, the entire community, you just pray about it, make dua, and then you just give it to Allah because it's not about what we can't do. It's about all the things that Allah could make happen right now. So.
And just to that point, just want to say that whatever you put on by Allah's mercy, people will emerge. So you'll be surprised. Like it put our voice competition. You put it on, boom, all of a sudden people will emerge who will bring their children and people showing up to practices. You got coaches, that are dedicating their time. So whatever it is, if you're inspired to do it, go light or heavy. Inshallah, Allah bless you with the resources. And people will emerge that are looking for it. People are hungry. We're all hungry. We're here now because we're literally. And if we need some leadership training, like some help with leadership training, we got it, inshallah. We'll be able to help you out. So, for the job.
Okay, I'm not gonna try to, make this closing remark too long. I'd be remiss if I didn't start off this closing remark by saying that our organization, Muslim Culture Con, we are currently having a Ramadan fundraiser. So if you check out our social medias, at Muslim Culture Con, CON, Facebook, our website is muslimculturecon.com, and then Instagram. You'll see the links to our fundraiser and things like that. I'm avoiding that, that's bad. Mashallah. Okay, so yeah, people, if you got some money, donate inshallah. If you know people that got some money, donate, have them donate inshallah. If you know people that know people that got some money, send the link to them inshallah so we can donate so that we can kind of do this work of empowerment, upliftment, and education of young adult Muslims. So that's what I'm starting off. Well, that's first point. Into the actual closing remarks for what we've been kind of talking about here. One of the things that I have felt is something that is missing, I guess you could say, for us in terms of our ownership of our masajid, our ownership of our Muslim identity, is that there was a time when our culture as Black people was fitted in Islam in the best way that we knew at the time. There was a way that we expressed ourselves culturally, and Islam was in that. And I think there's been this time that I feel like within the past 30, 40 years where we've been duped to believe that our cultural expression, our Black American cultural expression is haram. It's lesser than, it's not Islamic, it's not this, it's not that, blah, 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 blah. What do you mean you over there rapping about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That's haram. What do you mean you're over there, sister, with your way that you do your hijab and like this, and you're in hijab, but nah, it's not a burqa, it's not an abaya or whatever. That's haram. Now you gotta wear an abaya. You gotta look like them over there. Brother, you wearing a suit? No, you need to wear a thobe. Right? Dreadlocks are haram. Right? So many of these things that we've been duped, that we've been told on, that I feel like subconsciously now we've adopted this feeling that our own cultural identity is not Islamic. Maybe we won't think it's outright haram, but at the very least it's not Islamic. There's no reason why we should have nights in the masjid where we're singing poetry on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're singing the Burda. And you know what? It sounds like blues. It sounds like soul. When we recite our Quran, there's no reason that we have to sound like a brother from Egypt, and they sound beautiful, mashallah. There's no reason why we sound like a brother from Syria, and they sound beautiful, mashallah. We can sound like ourselves. I'm working on it. I'm not the best. But these are these things that are going to push us to, and it's going to push our children, so that our children are going to realize that, oh, wait, no, this is ours. Because you know what? It doesn't sound like the outer man. It doesn't sound like our Pakistani brothers and sisters. So we have to adopt Islam truly and completely within the tradition, because there is a tradition that spans back all the way to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's going to take us, we're going to have to go to the Syrian brother, we're going to have to go to the Egyptian brother that has a literal train from teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher, all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because we have to stay connected to that chain. Otherwise we'll go astray. But then we go, we get it, and we bring it back to us, and then we make it ours. We put our clothing on it, we put our dashiki, thing on it, right? And then that's going to be the thing that really gives us ownership of our own deen. And then from there, we just make dua. And as the great Imam Haddad said, Jahid to Shahid. Struggle and witness. We struggle, we do the work that we need to do, we write our intentions. We make dua, we pray about it, we make tahajjud. If we really want it, we need to be making tahajjud for it every single night, and that's hard. But you know what? That's the struggle. And then we do that, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it happen. The outcome is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's affair. That's not our job to worry about the outcome, it's our job. And then we witness what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained. And I think once we do that, and we really take ownership of our deen of Islam, and we play our role in this tradition, we'll be a strong limb of this greater ummah. And then you'll realize that, oh wait, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that he will take the oppressed people in a land and that he will make them the inheritors of that land, he wasn't just only referring to Bani Israel when he said that at that time. That is a timeless promise. It is a law of the universe. But you know what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also said that he will not change the conditions of a people until they change what is within themselves. So we got to change within ourselves first. We got to accept Islam as our own identity, as our own cultural identity, make it our own, not trying to take somebody else's. And then all these other things, inshallah, bi'idhnillah, will follow its own.
Inshallah, we will conclude. Let's go ahead and conclude the dua. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا ومن ذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. O our Lord, please bestow upon us from among our spouses, our progeny, and from among our spouses and our progeny, a coolness to our eyes, and make us leaders for the God conscious. O Allah, continue to guide us and show us the way. Show us what it is that we should be focused on to please you. Help our youth be guided, protect them from the danger, protect them from the threats, protect them from the evil. Oh Allah, allow them to know you, to love you, to know the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and to make Islam their identity, to make Islam their love, to make Islam what they use as the guiding force in their life. And oh Allah, allow us to be all of us here to see the end of Ramadan, to see the Eid, and accept our fast and our prayers.
Ameen. Salam.
Assalamu alaikum. Yes, ma'am.
We had a lot of good ideas here you're thinking about. So then we go home and we break fast and we kind of forget about